Okay, good morning. Welcome, and thank you for choosing to join our session as part of your conference experience. I'm just going to share my screen, but before I do, a couple of housekeeping bits. If you'd like to introduce yourselves on the chat function at the bottom of the screen, that'd be lovely so we know who's here. We will be having a Q&A session at the end of this presentation, but if you ask questions throughout, we'll try and get to as many of them as we can. Let me share my screen. Okay, can you see that? Belinda, can you see that?
I can, yeah.
I'm actually just going to make sure that I've shared my sound because there's a couple of times when I've forgotten to do that. There we go. Okay, from beginning. Okay, so this is the What's Your Digital Sporting Story session. Just to introduce myself, I'm Kate Turner, and this is Belinda Scarlett.
Hi.
And we've been working as the digital project coordinators on this project. A bit of background, we're both specialists in heritage interpretation and storytelling, and we've been working in collections and explored the use of digital technologies for sharing stories as well. We've worked across different heritage organisations, but quite a lot specifically with sporting, especially Belinda, who's worked with sports collections for over 15 years and is now curator of women's football at the National Football Museum. In addition to developing gallery interpretation, Belinda's also been exploring ways to get collections online. Particularly since lockdown at the National Football Museum, she's been involved in creating videos inspired by the first 11 collections. She's also helped to put their temporary exhibition, Strip, online in a dedicated collections website. And they've been working on a podcast as well. So there's the Strip podcast, which you can now access on Spotify. I met Belinda when I was working on the Unlocking the Hidden History of Women's Football project, which she was managing at the National Football Museum. And I now work as a heritage consultant. I founded Our Stories Heritage Consultancy in 2017. I work with all different heritage organisations with research, exhibitions and evaluation projects. And in the past few years, we've been exploring a media branch. So we've created a series of films for places like the People's History Museum. And now we're looking at augmented reality and apps for getting collections online in a kind of different digital way. In this project, we've been supported by other media experts. So Russell Todd, who will be joining us a bit later, who I'm sure most of you will either have met or heard at some point. He's the Sporting Heritage resident podcasting expert. You might have listened to some of his podcasts on the Sporting Heritage SoundCloud. Most recently, he interviewed the conference keynote speaker, Dame Sarah Story, so I'd recommend listening to that. Russell supported the Digital Storytelling Project by creating a podcasting tutorial and leading our Introduction to Podcasting webinar. But he also manages various other podcasts, including the Community Development Podcast. So he's the absolute expert to ask any questions about building a podcasting community. And our other media expert was Cy Gamble, who's a filmmaker. Cy's worked in video production and marketing for 10 years in TV campaigns and entertainment projects. Cy created a filmmaking tutorial and supported our Introduction to Digital Storytelling webinar. All the resources I've mentioned are actually available on our page on the website, as well as on a lot of them on the Sporting Heritage YouTube channel. But we'll talk through those more specifically a bit later on. I'll just hand over to Belinda to talk about the project.
Thanks, Kate. So my name is Belinda, and I'm going to give you an overview about the project and its aims and objectives. So during lockdown, Sporting Heritage saw that their work could support the sector to help fill the void left by the cancellation of a lot of the summer sporting activities and events, and that the time could be used to raise awareness of sporting heritage and its impact on sport in the present. So Sporting Heritage secured funding from Art Fund UK to deliver a short programme of digital activity to support the sector to engage in digital work. The programme saw us work with those who hold sports collections or have sporting heritage stories to tell, to create short videos or podcasts and to help them to share their sporting heritage digitally. We recognise that the holders of these collections would need training and support to help them to do this. So our task was pitching this support correctly, making sure the sector was aware that the support was available and converting this into the production of new digital content. Building an audience for this content was also part of the challenge. So the aims and objectives of the project were to build a bank of video and podcast case studies about the nation's sporting heritage for inspiration, research and knowledge, to encourage over 200 users to access skills webinars and tutorials, to create a social media campaign around the project, building on Sporting Heritage's existing media work using the hashtag #YourSportingStory, and to look to work with audiences who traditionally engage less with sporting heritage, to make links with National Sporting Heritage Day 2020. And we were also asked to make recommendations for further digital skills projects for the sporting heritage community. Let's hand back to Kate. Oh, you're on mute, Kate.
Sorry about that. Hello. As we started work on the project and addressing the aims and objectives, we recognised that there were some organisational needs which we would kind of focus on. So the first was maintaining audiences in difficult times. That's kind of the reason that this project was set up, with museums and sporting organisations having to close their doors. Obviously, audiences and visitors weren't able to visit in person. And in addition, gaining new audiences and building a community online, which is something which I think museums and sporting organisations would look to do anyway. And this was just kind of a push to increase that. So we were looking at making sure that we could support organisations to sustain and gain new audiences through this project. To share significant sporting stories of collections in storage. So a lot of museums and sports organisations have their historic collections off display, and film, podcast or media can be a really brilliant way to get some of those stories out. So that was another of our aims with the organisational needs. Little to no budget. Even some of the biggest organisations don't have digital budgets. So we didn't want to create a project where we told you had to go and buy a really expensive flashy camera or download the most expensive software for editing. So we wanted to keep that as a focal point. And upskilling existing staff rather than outsourcing all the time. It's really valuable for staff and for the organisation to have some of these skills in-house. So we wanted to work directly with organisations to upskill the teams. So what do? We launched the digital storytelling project on social media, Sporting Heritage social media platforms. This included at the very beginning asking some young people who are involved in sports teams for the type of content that they would like to see. So we had some people saying they wanted to see more from specific footballers or about specific events like Wimbledon. So this was quite nice to kind of get the conversation going. You might have seen the hashtag #YourSportingStory appearing on Twitter. If and when you feel inspired to create some digital content, it would be great if you can use that same hashtag so that we can keep filling social media with sporting heritage. We worked with professional filmmaker Sai, who I mentioned before, to produce a short video tutorial to introduce the sector to the basics of high quality digital storytelling and filmmaking. So this included pointers for interpreting objects for a digital audience, as well as your basics of getting your lighting right and getting your sound set up properly. We delivered a 3-hour-long skills webinar with Sai, which is available on our Sporting Heritage YouTube channel. And then we provided some one-to-one support with Sporting Heritage members and the owners of sporting collections to produce short videos, and we've been sharing these as well. More recently, we've shifted our focus to the podcasting side of the project, working with Russell Todd, who is in the bottom of the screen there. So with Russell, we produced a tutorial video, which is kind of a companion guide. Russell created it so that you could use it as you're creating your podcasts. It's got a kind of user guide to CleanFeed, which is some podcast recording software. and Audacity, which is an editing program. We delivered a 3-hour-long webinar on podcast recording, editing and sharing with Russell, which is also available on the Sporting Heritage YouTube channel. And we also tied in with National Sporting Heritage Day, where we shared some new films, and we also shared some of our resources. Oh, Belinda, you're muted now.
Sorry. We're going to look at some case studies that we produced in partnership with various organisations throughout the project. One thing that we came across from the start of the project really was that the variation in the types of stories that people have to share and in the different types of support people need to help them to start their digital journey. So obviously from grassroots sports organisations to private collectors to established sports museums, it's the variety of collections within the sporting heritage community that gives so much variety to what we do and was such an amazing part of this project. And I think that comes across in the 4 case studies that we're going to focus on now. So the first of these case studies was Wimbledon Lawn Tennis Museum. So Wimbledon Museum is an example of video content that focuses on the story of one collection object from a well-established sporting heritage organisation. I think it's a great example of how you can use one object to explore a story from many angles and in much greater depth than you could using more traditional interpretation methods. The curator, Emma Traherne, created a fantastic, high-quality short film about the ladies' singles trophy, created mostly from home and I think also from some existing content. So like many organisations, Wimbledon Lawn Tennis Museum and the curator Emma have been keen to develop digital content for some time, and lockdown gave them the impetus to move their digital work forward. Digital storytelling can give your audience much greater access to an object's history than you could achieve in an exhibition environment. And more importantly, it gives you space to tell hidden stories and histories. We used this video online around the time of the ladies' single final would have been taking place, and we wanted to build on anticipated interest in tennis around this time. It was also supported by a blog from the local tennis league, showing how you can use different types of online content to drive interest in a subject across different platforms. So I'm hoping now that Kate can play the video.
Hello, my name is Emma Traherne and I'm the curator at Wimbledon Lawn Tennis Museum. And today I'm going to be sharing with you one of the most famous objects on display in the museum, the Ladies' Singles Trophy. It is a partly gilded silver salver, weighing in at 2.3 kilograms, and some people refer to it as the rosewater dish or the Venus rosewater dish, which is possibly a reference to lots of the goddesses which are included in the decoration. But in the centre of the trophy is not actually Venus, it's a representation of temperance. Around her in a decorative band are earth, wind, fire and water represented, and around the outer rim of the trophy are the 7 liberal arts represented by goddesses and overseen by Minerva. A unique, famous sports trophy, but in fact it is a replica, and even a replica of a replica. Way back in 1585, François Boite created the original dish out of pewter. Over time, many people copied his design. And in the early 17th century, Caspar Endelin made a few different versions, one of which ended up in the Louvre in Paris. The Ladies' Singles Trophy is a cast of that Louvre dish, and it was made in 1864 in Birmingham by Elkington & Co. Although Blanche Bingley, later Hilliard, was the first champion to win the trophy in 1886, Maud Watson's name, the champion from 84 and 85, was later added. The engravings of the champions begin on the front of the trophy, but in 1958 they switched to the back, and in 2016 a plinth was added as there was no more space on the trophy for the champions' names. Today, The champions do not get to take the trophy home with them, but they do get a beautiful 3/4 size replica, which includes all the names of the champions, to take home that very day.
Okay, so on to our second case study. Our second case study is an organisation called Girls United Football Association. Girls United are an example of a sports organisation with a fantastic backstory and team, and they've begun to use film to introduce some of the coaches that are involved in their work, as well as to share the story of their founding. Girls United are a relatively new sporting organisation, and they're just starting to build an archive of their own organisation's sporting heritage. Their audience is quite digitally experienced and are happy to engage online with sporting content. If your organisation is built on certain sporting values, which you believe will be of interest to others and may inspire people to get involved, making films with personable people will help to spread your message. Girls United agreed to share a video of their founder, Romina, as they saw how engaging with Sporting Heritage CIC could help promote their brand to new audiences. This video shows how your first step into digital storytelling may be as simple as introducing yourself, your organisation, and your values to a wider audience. Could you share the video, please, Kate?
Romina, founder of Girls United, and we're here in Bacalar at one of our clubs. We've been running for 2.5 years, almost 3 years now. It launched here in Bacalar in the southeast of Mexico, and we now also have a club in London, which is a year old. And yeah, we hope to have many more.
How did the whole project get started? What was the...
So I founded it because I'm a lifelong footballer and I really value what it's brought to my life. I think it's a really powerful tool to be involved in a team sport, and especially football, because it's such a universal language. But I just met way too many girls throughout my life that didn't have the opportunity to play. So the project is born out of the desire to have more girls participating in football. But even beyond that, what we're really looking to do is to build a network of players and coaches and supporters, all who believe in the power of sport to create more gender equality more broadly. So using football as a tool to learn skills that can help them develop on and off pitch and help them become ambitious leaders of their communities, help them reach whatever goals they have and whatever dreams they have. So yesterday we had the semifinal, the first semifinal of our Chicas Unidas League. We call it the Liga Impulso, which means sort of the launching league, because the aim of the league is to have more women playing across the municipality of Bacalar. So we visited different communities, we invited them to get a team together and participate in the league, and it's now the semifinals. So we had 4 different teams from 3 different communities. It was some great football, some really great support, lots of spectators, and really, really good matches. So we're excited to see how it unravels.
So the third case study is different again. We were working with the Hockey Museum, who a lot of you might have been in contact with. They're fantastic with Sporting Heritage CIC. But this year marks the centenary of Great Britain's gold medal win at the 1920 Antwerp Olympic Games. And this anniversary was celebrated by a very special event at the Hockey Museum. The family of the 1920 team goalkeeper, Harry Haslam, were invited to the museum to be retrospectively awarded his honours cap. And while it couldn't be a really large scale event, it was just with the family. The museum were looking to find ways to share what was going on with a digital audience. So the museum wanted to promote the event and worked with us to create a film to share on social media, using the sporting story of Harry Haslam and a wonderful image of him, which you'll see in this video. Curator Mike Smith was able to promote this really exciting event. It's an example of how media can be used not only to share your collection and your stories, but also as a call to action. So if you've got an event or something that you want people to be involved with, you can create film and put it out on social media to get a really good reach. If you're using the right hashtags and getting the right people to share it, it can be really, really good for reaching, sustaining audiences and reaching new audiences as well. The team are considering ways to continue using film and may potentially do so by marking future cap awarding ceremonies. And I'll show you this example.
Modern hockey is 150 years old. Consequently, the sport enjoys many centenaries, but few can be as notable as that is taking place on Saturday the 5th of September. That will be exactly 100 years to the day that Great Britain hockey team won the gold medal at the Antwerp Olympics in 1920. This was in fact the first outing for a Great Britain hockey team in the Olympics, with only 4 teams taking part in a round-robin event: Belgium, Denmark, France and Great Britain. To commemorate this historic event, we are holding a special presentation day at the museum, and we will be very privileged on the 5th of September to have the family of Harry Haslam, the goalkeeper, visiting us to mark this occasion. They will bring with them some of Harry's memorabilia, including his gold medal. And we have never actually seen a 1920 gold medal here at the Hockey Museum. We already have a little bit of Harry's memorabilia in that he wrote a book, and there is a splendid photograph of him in his goalkeeping equipment, which for those of you out there who are goalkeepers will realise was fairly flimsy. This event is also the culmination for us at the Hockey Museum of a very significant project that we've been working on for 5 years. We have been compiling the statistical records of Great Britain going back now to 1920. Although originally it was thought that the first Great Britain match was at the London Olympics in 1948. History has been rewritten. Harry, being the goalkeeper in the team and therefore mentioned first, will become the Great Britain player #1. This event for us at the museum kicks off, or should I say bullies off, a programme of presenting caps to all players who have represented Great Britain over the years. And the Tokyo teams for 2021 will receive their caps at an event in London in May next year. We're very sorry that we're unable to invite the public to this amazing event, but unfortunately COVID prevents that. However, we will film the proceedings and this will be available soon after the event.
Okay, and our final case study for today features Russ Martin, who some of you may know as Memorabilia Man. Russ's example is quite different to the others in that he's a private collector. So each object he has in his collection has kind of a double story. So he's got the story of the object itself, but also the personal memory of when and why it was collected. So Russ got in touch with us as he was looking to find a way to get his collection out to the public and to raise awareness of it amongst sporting organisations and other collectors who might be interested in it. Russell explained that his collection is now largely in storage and he was looking to find a new home for it. But before he did so, he wanted to document his objects and to share the memories which accompany them. He's currently writing a memoir as well, which is quite interesting. And he said that he's found this process really useful for reminding him of what he's got, but also of making him think about why he's got it and the stories associated. Speaking can actually be easier, which you may find if you start doing film and podcast. It can be easier than writing and often more engaging. So Russ is exploring ways to share more of his collections in this way on his Twitter, his Facebook and on his website. So I'll give this a play now.
Hi, well I've been asked many times why have I been collecting memorabilia and how did I get it and when did I start? Well, it's something, I was about 8, 9 years of age. I went to the Arsenal game, Blackburn Rovers were playing them, and I went up on the coach I met Eddie Clayton and Brian Douglas, who was captain and player of England. And I met a couple of players at the Arsenal, Tapscott and Jack Kelsey, and that was my first piece basically. I mean, most kids had autograph books. Well, I got a picture on a little page of a book, and of course I've still got some of the programmes going back to the 40s, which is but I thought as well, just how my collection does change about this is rugby. This is one of my prize pieces. It's the 74 Lions, undefeated in New Zealand and South Africa. And for me, what was magic, that most of them came in my cocktail bar in Durban and drank there. And of course, I've met quite a few of them since in Jersey, where we had a restaurant. So this is a real memento. Going back again to football, which I just pulled out, which I forgot about, but this, as most people will know, is the Manchester United, that terrible accident in Munich where quite a few of them passed away and died. But I was doing a big thing in South Africa with football cards for Man U. They sent out some directors because it was going very well, presented me with this, and it says on there that there was never a coloured picture of the team ever before. This has been reimposed. It's as a memory. And one of the artists at the evening paper in Manchester did this, and that's also really unique. So again, it's just showing bits and pieces, stuff that I love, heroes, people that you could talk about and look up to, and it was wonderful times.
Okay, so hopefully these examples have shown you the diverse ways that you can share your sporting story using film. You can use editing to overlay images like the Wimbledon Museum and the Hockey Museum did, or you can simply stand with your objects or hold them up to the screen and just speak about them. The main thing is getting started. So we really hope that you feel inspired and maybe empowered after watching some of these examples to give it a go and kind of see how you can use film to support your organisation and build your audiences. So we did also aim to look at podcasting in this project as a way to get sporting collections out and make them accessible. We identified early on that in many ways, well, not many ways, in some ways, podcasting might seem more challenging than making a film. It's definitely something that fewer people have tried, because of course we make videos of friends and family all the time with our phones. Podcasting maybe seemed a little bit scarier. But there's so many benefits to podcasting, and getting your collection out through a podcast is becoming more and more popular and more valuable. To help break down some of these barriers and to show the methods of podcasting, we worked with Sporting Heritage CIC's podcaster in residence, Russell Todd, who's here and is just going to tell you a little bit about some of the benefits and ideas around podcasting.
Hello again. I'm going to try not to repeat too much of what I said in the first session. Keep my powder dry a little bit. Yeah, I mean, Kate's right. It can be quite daunting. And I think one of the things to really bear in mind, I mean, I touched on in the first session the need to consider the capacity that you've got. I thought what was really fascinating yesterday was Andrew Hignell in the opening session yesterday was talking about the input of volunteers and some of the skill set that they brought. And that was a contributing factor into how the CC4 Cricket, Welsh Cricket Museum in Cardiff has been able to embrace the media and sort of dip their toes into it at the very least. I think it's really good to plan what you want to do with your podcast. So I touched in the first session about how you plan particular episodes, who you're involving, how you prepare them, and target who you want to reach with the episode and things like that. But it's certainly worth spending some time looking at, okay, well, what do we want to do with our podcast voice? What sorts of information do we want to convey more broadly? And then obviously, specific episodes might change from episode to episode. But it does depend. Some people tend to be the sort of individual who wants to kind of dive in and get their hands dirty and have a play around with the technology, all of which is great. And if that's your style, your learning approach to these things, or if you have a little bit of the digital literacy already for that you've acquired from other sources, then great, do it. what I always say to people is, and I think I said this myself in the earlier session, is that I learned through doing. I probably produced over 200 episodes now. There's episodes that I look back and I cringe at because they're not that good. There's others that I look back and I'm really, really proud of them, and I've had feedback from people who've said that's my that echoes my experience in following Welsh football or whatever it might be. It's given a voice to people whose voice don't, certainly in the community development context, the one I do, whose voice doesn't tend to get heard. So there can be some really quite, how shall I put it, emotive, powerful. I mentioned the one about sports memories with Richard and Bridget a bit earlier that we did last year in the Cardiff conference. Incredibly powerful. And people are talking about how they had their father back for the duration of a sporting memory session. Priceless. And I think what happens with podcasts, and this is something again to bear in mind if you're not familiar with them, most people tend to listen to them in a very solitary setting, on the commute, out for a walk, walking the dog, on the treadmill, in the gym, or whatever it might be. People don't tend to listen to them in a social, almost exclusively never listen to them in a social context. They might suggest that their friends listen to the particular episode, or they get suggested by a friend of theirs to listen to something, but it's not a very social and a collective experience listening to these things. So what you have the opportunity is to really appeal to individuals, even though you don't know who they are necessarily, or you can't see them, and that's actually can be quite useful, quite powerful, because people feel like they're being talked to rather than being talked at, and that sense that you can then build a community around it. So rather than talking about just listeners or your audience, which sort of personalizes them a little bit, if you start talking about a sense of community and encouraging people to interact, you can reach people in a way that perhaps other media less so, has the ability less so to do. And so I think that's something always to be aware of, but to potentially embrace. And I think certainly for something like sport and heritage, in my experience, and I'm not a heritage expert, enthusiast, but not an expert, and certainly not in a professional sense, it's the enthusiasm that comes through in spades, and the passion and the knowledge that comes through in spades that people have got, and that's what people are wanting to listen to. So if you are curious, give it a go, have a look at the webinar, have a look at the tutorial. Hopefully it's sort of pushed people's buttons and it's covered the necessary elements, but it is daunting. But I would say, if you want to get involved, give it a go. Listen to others as well. That's another key thing. Listen to others that are out there that might be similar, because you can learn a lot from how other people approach it in terms of how they brand it, their voice, the sort of level of depth they go into in terms of content. We had a question a bit earlier around what's the ideal length. It sort of depends, was my probably rather unhelpful answer, but listen to others to get a feel for, okay, 30 minutes, it can rattle by, you can get a little bit of, you can scratch beneath the surface of a topic, you can go into something in depth, you can deconstruct complex issues as well. That can be quite helpful if that's something you need to do. So listen to those others, and copy and imitate, because that's what we're all doing, trust me. There's very few people that have got any new ideas left to exploit, really, until a new technology and the new medium comes along, I don't suppose. And just in response quickly to something that Stuart Stanton has posted around trying to connect it with, I think it's Figshare that he uses, build it into your broader, I think Kate touched on this, build it into your broader social media, digital presence and profile, because none of these things act in isolation of the others. That's all I'll say at this point. There's an opportunity for questions a little bit later.
Thanks, Russell. Now we're going to look at where you can find some of the resources. So I think Kate's already mentioned that as this project's come to an end, we've tried to make all our resources available on the Sporting Heritage website, so that they're there for everyone to go and have a look at, and hopefully get people started to actually do some of this stuff. So I'm going to try and share the website now, so you can take a quick look at it. There we are. Can you see that, Kate? Yeah. Okay, so on the website you'll find recordings of the webinars on filmmaking and podcasting. There's 2 tutorials there as well. So the filmmaking tutorial is quite a brief 10-minute these are the basics to make a decent film. The podcasting tutorial is really an accompaniment to the webinar. So together they will give you pretty much everything you need to start with podcasting. And you can also download a crib sheet, which is, again, a really basic step-by-step guide to how to make a film, and then the requirements of sharing it on different types of social media. So doing things like making sure that the film is the correct length to share on Twitter or Instagram or Facebook. And you can also see a link there to Sporting Heritage on YouTube, where all of the videos that we've created in partnership with people are available, and the webinars also. And there's mine and Kate's contact details there as well, if you want to get in touch with us after this. So what we'd really like is that people use all of these resources, and that if you do create some digital content, that you share it not only on your own social media platforms, but that you try and become part of the Sporting Heritage online community as well. So if you use the hashtag #YourSportingStory when you're sharing any of this content, then it becomes part of the Sporting Heritage bank of material, and you can benefit from having the audience that Sporting Heritage already has as well. Okay, I'll just stop sharing that. It's okay if you could share the presentation again.
Yep.
Thank you.
Here we go. Okay, so a reflection. So this was the first attempt to deliver digital support by Sporting Heritage CIC. So we've been closely monitoring our approach to see where we can improve. After delivering this first part of the project, which offered quite general introductions to digital storytelling, we had a number of reflections about the project and how it could be adapted to best support the sector, really. One of the main issues we identified was the variation of need and skills throughout the sector, as well as budgets and staff availability. While some organisations are used to taking photographs and sharing short clips of their collections, others are starting completely from scratch. So we really needed to look at more tailored support in our approach going forward to ensure we have the biggest impact and that we're the most useful we can be for you. So we've started to think about how specific this training needs to be. And we now want to design our next steps with you. Belinda will tell you a bit more about that.
Yeah, so as Kate just mentioned, we're keen to use the next part of this project to respond to the needs of the Sporting Heritage sector. We're all reacting and changing the ways that we all work in response to the pandemic, and it seems like that might be continuing for quite some time now. So I think there is a need for continued support. The feedback we got from the sessions in the first part of the project showed there was particular interest in particular areas of filmmaking and podcasting and in other digital skills. So our plan is to deliver a series of more in-depth, interactive and workshop style sessions alongside other digital experts to respond to this and provide more tailored one-to-one support for organisations to help them start their digital storytelling journey. The next webinar session is on Tuesday, the 27th of October, and this will be an interactive workshop focusing on how to keep building great stories and how to share them with your audiences. We'll be inviting attendees to bring along an object or a story that they'd like to share digitally, so we can explore them together and amongst the group and try and get a better idea of how that story can be developed and shared. You can sign up to this workshop at the moment on the Sporting Heritage Eventbrite page. And we're also going to build on this over the next couple of months, perhaps look at marketing, building an audience for digital content, and how to successfully deliver a virtual learning or engagement session as many of us shift our engagement online. We'd like to use the feedback from this session as well to help inform our work. So you might have seen on Twitter earlier on this week on the Sporting Heritage feed, a Twitter poll asking questions about how to gauge your interest in a range of future training opportunities. And hopefully that will help us make sure that the next stage of the project is as successful and as useful as it can be. So Fran is going to help us hopefully share a poll now as part of the webinar that is the same as the one on Twitter. So hopefully we can collate all that information and me and Kate can build the next set of webinars based on those responses. So we'll give you about 2 minutes or so, I think, to look through these 3 questions. And obviously we're also open to ideas. So if nothing on here interests you, then please let myself and Kate know, and we can perhaps, if there's a lot of people that want a particular type of support, then we can perhaps deliver a webinar on that basis as well. So once, Fran, if you think that most people have responded, is it possible for you to share the results? Thank you. I think we're particularly interested in hearing from people about the 3rd question as well. So because we've already done some work on filmmaking and podcasting, it'll be great to know where we go from there and what people's needs are. If, like a lot of places, we can't open or have group sessions or learning activities in the same way that we could previously, how do we switch that engagement online? So if people are interested in that, then I think that's something that we would definitely look at going forwards. Okay, so does that mean, Fran, that everybody can see that, or do I need to go through that? I'll just briefly have a look at this. So yeah, filmmaking looks like editing comes out top, which we sort of expected. I think people were quite comfortable with even picking up their phone and making a film. It's just then how you make it look professional, and how you perhaps edit in some of the other collection digital assets that you might have within your collection as well. Okay, brilliant, thanks, Fran. And podcasting, editing again. Okay, that's interesting. Again, I think that is probably the hardest part of the whole process, and pretty equal for the 3rd. I think there's probably quite a lot of interest in all of those things from other people that I've spoken to in the heritage sector, as well as, like I said before, people shift to online engagement with their audiences instead of doing it on site. Okay, that's great. I'm hoping that we can capture that information in some way, and we'll put that together with the feedback we've got from Twitter, and that will really help us make sure that the next set of webinars is responding to what people want. Okay, and finally, I'll just hand over to Kate.
Close this poll. Yeah, so it's just to give you our contact details, really. If you feel enthused and ready to launch into your digital storytelling journey, please do get in touch with us, or sign up to next week's webinar, which, as Belinda said, is going to be really interactive, and hopefully if you come along and bring your object, you'll finish the session feeling ready to make a film or podcast about that object. We really want to hear your ideas, as Belinda said. If anything didn't crop up in the options that we gave for our next steps, please do send us an email and let us know if you've got some more specific needs. And we're going to move on to some questions now. So I know that people have been sharing questions throughout, which is fab. But if you've got any more, we'll start, and you can just keep asking. So the first one was, how well did we engage with people who don't normally engage? I think that's something that we're definitely evaluating now, and it's something that we want to build into the next steps. I think it will come under building a digital community and the kind of marketing side of things. And I think that will really come through with that if people want to join that. What do you think, Belinda?
Yeah, I mean, I think we tried really hard right at the beginning of the project to engage with some organisations that are perhaps younger than some that might naturally be already followers of sporting heritage, ones which focus on women and girls in sport as well, which I know Sporting Heritage already do fantastically well. And we did have some success with that. I think what I find is when you talk to sporting heritage organisations, they sometimes think that their stories aren't relevant to different types of audiences, but I think they really are, and particularly young people. A lot of the hurdles or barriers that they have in sport now have been there for hundreds of years potentially. So when I speak to younger people, particularly about engaging with sporting heritage, they might be interested in sport, but they don't understand how the heritage side of sport really links to their own personal experience. So I think there's massive room to engage with that audience. It's just how to do it, and that is something that me and Kate want to look at, is how you build that online sports community across all the different sports. So I have found it a challenge, but I've done it quite well at the National Football Museum with one sport, and it's how do we do that across all the different sports as well, because I think that will hopefully engage with people who don't think that sporting heritage is something that's relevant to them. I've found that if you look at what's happening in a particular sport now and try and make links to your collection, that's another way of working or making links to people that don't naturally think that there's something interesting in your organisation for them. So at the Football Museum, we've looked at football kits through Strip, and we've linked very much with grassroots football teams and with women's football teams, and we found that those type of groups are very active online. So it's been a great way of really building our online audience, because the minute that we post something about grassroots football, the entire grassroots football community jumps on board with that. So I think you can help engage people who don't normally engage with your work by sort of talking about very relevant contemporary issues as well. I don't know if that helps.
That's great. The second question is links to relevant websites and podcasts. So I think that means if you share something in one place, how do you link it out? So figshare.com was mentioned. I think Russell, you're probably the best to answer.
I'm not overly familiar with that site, to be perfectly honest, although Stuart sent me a couple of times different links to some of his cycling stuff that he posts there. Invariably these days, what you tend to find is a lot of these platforms across social media, digital platforms, they're homogenizing, so they tend to be using the same sort of symbolism and the same sort of language. So you tend to see lots of square type signs for sharing or retweeting or reposting, heart for like, and so on. So the literacy is is broadly transferable, and of course it's in the interest of these platforms to make that easy for people, or to continue to make it easier, but also to be to be connectable, I suppose, to other platforms. So there's usually a lot of ways in which that can be done. You might need to be a bit more literate, not that I am, frankly, in things like HTML, so you can drop a SoundCloud channel or a particular episode into your website. Now how that is done on a technical level would depend on how your website is hosted, but even if it was a simple WordPress site, you could easily drop that in with a plugin. So you would have to ask your your web hoster, your web designer to do that. Most people who design websites in that way are fairly literate with all of this sort of stuff. You do have to put in a bit of effort to try to keep up with it all, because it can be fast paced. But likewise then with different the main principal social media, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, again, all of these sites are tend to be easily connected. So certainly our SoundCloud page, on the home page, the landing page, if you go to soundcloud.com/sporting heritage, we've tweaked the profile. We can now, because SoundCloud have allowed us to, we can put more links to it, to the Facebook page, to the Instagram channel, to the website, to a particular page. So I think we put something on around booking on for this, for example. So you try to maximize, you're casting your net as far and as wide as possible. In terms of you know, in terms of visual and audio, you know, you can put your podcasts on YouTube. YouTube will take them. You might then want to rotate the images that accompany that, so it's a bit more of a visual, you know, engagement. But if that's your platform of choice, then great. What you tend to find you have to do though is, you know, is connect them all up yourself. It isn't done automatically, and I can understand why that would be a bit daunting if you don't know where to start. So seek the advice out, I guess. I think in terms of, again, to get a little bit technical, RSS, if you can find a site for your podcasts where you host. So Apple, for example, iTunes doesn't host podcasts. It's got millions upon millions of episodes, but it doesn't host any of them in any physical sense. SoundCloud does, and through RSS, which is really simple syndication, you can connect to other platforms. So again, you're casting your net that much wider. So Podbean, Acast, Anchor. I mean, there's tons and tons of them. Spotify is another one. So that RSS feed is really key to this. So you might want to go into either your website or your YouTube channel or your SoundCloud, Audio Boom. All of these are, and you find your RSS, and you've gone a long way to making things a bit more connectable and a bit more sort of shareable. Going any more technical than that in this forum now, I'm not sure that would necessarily be helpful. It'll send people to sleep maybe, but you know, happy to discuss afterwards, obviously.
That's fab. There was a question about revenue streams. Originally, it was I think it was specifically about podcasting, but then somebody broadened it out a bit. I think that this is definitely something we should pursue in the next steps, looking at not just fundraising, but kind of sustainable digital content. Russell, do you know about podcasting specifically?
So I posted, it's a fairly dense report, and I apologize for that, but there is a specific section around revenue of podcasts specifically. So answering Rajiv's point initially, or his question initially, might have relevance to Alan's point. There's a lot in there around the amount of revenue that is now available and is finding its way to podcasts. Now, this is primarily in the form of sponsorship and forms of collaboration like that. One of the things, I'm no Puritan about this, but one of the things I find a bit distasteful with football these days is the amount of connection with and tie-ins with betting and gambling, particularly online. As I said, if that's your thing, that's fine. It's not mine. So a lot of them are gambling related. Well, of course, there's big revenue streams available to those sort of companies. Personally, I wouldn't want to take that sort of money, and there might be other, moral and other, impediments on the part of organisations for wanting to take that kind of commercial buck, if you like. But there is out and out just commercial, and I think that is still the main. And I'm not entirely sure I will see a huge amount different changing in regard to that going forward with podcasts. One of the things I find interesting with Spotify is you do get a lot more socially public sector type adverts being thrust upon you if you just use the basic free tariff, and they will be tailored to wherever you're based. So I get things from, I don't know, Cardiff and Vale College every now and again, or the Open University in Wales or something like that. Increasingly, a lot of COVID related information is coming down these streams because they know that people are listening to them. I shared some data earlier in terms of in the earlier session around, the amount of young people streaming music, almost half stream music on a regular basis. So that's why things for college and things like that would find their way. So it could be that there are public bodies that would want to engage, and it could well be that there's collaborations with local authorities, with regional fora of all sorts of different types that might want to collaborate and might have a budget. And it might well be in the short term initially that it's a little bit of money from several different sources that lumps together that covers some of the costs related to whatever it is that you want to do. Certainly with respect to podcasting, you do not have to spend a lot of money to start, and I think that's one of the things I always try to ram home with people. So the slide I featured earlier, sorry to keep referring to a session earlier if you weren't there, clean feed, there's a free tariff and you can record over the internet, really good quality. But Audacity is free, massive, enormous wiki and online community that helps people, unpick knotty issues if they're stuck how to do something. Mics relatively affordable. There's plenty of cheap mics online that on eBay, for example, where people have have bought mics to get started, realize it's not for them, and now they want to cash it in. So, you know, that's how I would start. And I remember someone saying to me years and years ago, they said, look, don't go spending a fortune on a mic, because if you do, you'll be picking up noise that you don't have the editing skills to get rid of. Okay. Don't buy a rubbish mic because it's just a rubbish mic. So, you know, you don't have to spend a lot. And by a lot, I'm talking maybe, you know, 80, 90 quid. You can pick up a Blue Yeti, which is something I use a lot. And that's fine. That's adequate to begin with. If you're starting with nothing in terms of finance, that immediately is a cost. And I get that. But don't be put off by cost. But don't be persuaded as well and encouraged to be shelling out a load of money as well. That's not necessary either. From a funding point of view, I don't know so much. I applied recently, actually, in the last couple of weeks, to the HLF 15-minute fund. Sorry, and they have a specific element. There was a specific element they're referring to podcast and digital media. So I think some of the funders, I won't claim to be an expert, are more alert to the value and the reach and the staying contemporary as well, I suppose, of digital, and podcast does tend to be part of it. So that might be a move in the right direction as well.
Yeah, I was just going to follow on from that. The National Football Museum have managed to get a small amount of funding to start their first podcast. So it's definitely possible to do. You just need to be able to make a case for how it would develop your audience. And we're also looking at monetizing some of the virtual learning sessions that we're doing. So at the moment, we are just very much testing the waters about what people want to do online. But we've had quite a lot of interest from schools in how they can access us using webinars. So having an actual school session over a webcasting system, and how we might eventually start charging for that. So my sort of top tip would be, when you're thinking about how do we shift stuff from real to digital, is just get as many digital assets as possible when you're doing something. So if you're a curator who's unpacking a collection, just take photographs of it, quickly record yourself talking about it. And I think you'll find in a couple of months' time, that material that you've quickly just taken might actually form the basis of a really nice digital resource for a learning audience, or for any audience, that you can then share. It's just sort of coming at it from a different perspective, and it's something that I've had to take on board a lot in the last sort of 6 months, but even 12 to 18 months, about when I'm doing my work, how can I make that what I'm doing digitally accessible at the time. And if you're thinking about it when you're doing it, you don't have to then go back and do that later. And then how you can often share that via podcasts, via videos, via blogs, and it just makes it so much more accessible, I think. And eventually, hopefully, you can monetize that as well.
Can I come into that point as well? I think what you tend to find, certainly with podcasts, is it's not a very competitive sort of scene. It's quite collaborative. People want the medium more broadly to get more popular, to succeed, to innovate. So don't be shy to share content or make it available. So I take any of the examples that we've listened to so far at the conference. Much of that would be transferable to a podcast I'm doing about a different topic, or whether it's the specific sport, or it's an angle around equality, or arts in heritage and community development. That really motivated me yesterday with Robin, for example. That I could see me taking some of that audio, dropping it into a podcast to exemplify or illustrate a particular point in a broader episode. So you're kind of getting a bit more bang for your buck in terms of certainly the time that you've spent trying to prepare that stuff. You're putting it out through different media. Now, you don't want to keep dining out on the same clip forever and a day. So there's a balance, but yeah, that just because you've used it once doesn't mean it can't be used again, I would say. I think that's fine. As well as old episodes you put out maybe 2 years ago, if the anniversary of something comes around, send it out again. Just because if someone's discovered your podcast only in the last year, they won't necessarily have gone that far back, and plowed through the older episodes, through the archive, so to speak. So, be quite unashamed, quite brazen about it. That's what we all do.
Yeah. Okay, so I think we're getting close to wrapping up. There's been a bit of chat about social media in in the webinar chat here, and I think that's something that we can send out. I know that we're going to send out a summary of questions and answers, and we can address kind of ways to experiment with social media in that. I think the key is to look for other people, individuals and organisations like yourselves, and see what they're doing on their social media, and see who they're reaching and whether they're the types of audiences that you want to be reaching, and perhaps design some of your content and share it in that sort of way. But I think it's really about experimenting and just seeing where your audiences might be. There was a plug here from Regional Film Archives. This is really great, actually. I think a lot of people could benefit from this. So the Northwest Film Archive at Manchester Met Uni, but then generally regional film archives across the country will hold historical footage from various sporting events and stories, which you could use and maybe put into your own films and use snippets of. So it's definitely worth getting in touch with them. It's a great plug there. Oh yeah, TikTok. I'm not quite up with TikTok yet, but it's something we should look at. I think, yes, so we'll probably wrap up there. I think we'd all like to say thank you very much for joining us and choosing our panel today. Do please sign up to our Next Steps webinar. It would be really great to see you there. And don't forget about the Sporting Heritage Hangout, which is happening in 10 minutes. It's Joe Boardman and a host of experts who will be having a bit of an informal social networking and top tips session. Find different audiences. Yeah, that's it, experimenting with audiences. But yes, thank you very much. This will be available as part of the conference session video distribution, and yeah, we'll summarize some of those questions for you as well. So thank you.
Thank you very much,
Russell, for joining us as well.
Welcome.
Yeah, thanks, Russell. Bye.
Bye-bye.